Good morning, dear students. Today we are going to discuss about the Victorian part first background part point number 3, the great realistic school of fiction. Realism is nothing but a reality. Realism is a literary movement that started in France in the 1850s as a reaction against romanticism and which tried to show life as it was in literature all over Europe. Although the concept is also questioned by some critics, it is a useful term to understand the general spirit of the second half of the 19th century. A reaction to romanticism, a stress on reason and positivism, and a faith in the power of the artist to show reality. In England, this movement coincided approximately with the Victorian era, a period ruled by Queen Victoria from 1837 to 1901, which meant the height of the British Empire and the Industrial Revolution. The United Kingdom expanded its borders into America, Africa, Asia, and Oceania and became the first economic and political world power. Many critics prefer to talk about the Victorian age since many of the best English novelists of the period are not realistic in the same sense as their French or Russian counterparts, but whether more or less realistic. Novels are certainly the most important literary form of the period. Excellent novels read by an expanding educated middle class that had developed with economic prosperity. So let us know the novelist who will come under the Victorian era. So Walter Scott, 1771 to 1832, started out as a writer of romantic narrative verse and ended up as a historical novelist. He wrote several historical novels mainly about Scottish history, Yvonne, 1819. Jane Austen, 1775 to 1817, shared the chronological time with the Romantics, but she shares some of the features of realism. She has a unique talent and cannot really be assigned to any group. Her novels are Sense and Sensibility in 1811, Pride and Prejudice in 1813, Emma 1816 remain as popular and critically acclaimed as ever. Her primary interest is people, not ideas, and her achievement lies in the meticulously exact presentation of human situations and in the delineation of characters that are really living creatures. Her novels deal with the life of rural landowners seen from a woman's point of view, have little action but are full of humor and true dialogue. The Bronte sisters wrote after Jane Austen but are the most romantic of the Victorian novelists, particularly Emily Bronte 1818 to 1848, who wrote Wuthering Heights 1847, the epitome of the romantic novel. Wild passion set against a Yorkshire moors. Charlotte Bronte 1816 to 1855 wrote Jane Eyre 1847, a love story of great realism. So Charles Dickens 1812 to 1870 was perhaps the most popular novelist of the period. He serialized most of his novels, which may explain some of his weak plots. Dickens wrote vividly about London life and the struggles of the poor, but in a good humored fashion with grotesque characters, which was acceptable to readers of all classes. His early works, such as the Pickwick Papers, 1836, are masterpieces of comedy. Later, his works became darker without losing his genius for caricature. Oliver Twist 1837, David Copperfield 1850, Great Expectations 1861, A Christmas Carol 1843 is the popular story of Mr. Scrooge visited by the four Christmas ghosts. William M. Thackeray, 1811 to 1863, wrote many Vanity Fair 1847, a satire of high classes in English society. George Eliot, Mary Ann Evans, 1819-1890, might be the most realistic novel of these writers. Middlemarch, 1874, Anthony Trollope, 1815-1888, wrote novels about life in a provincial English town. Thomas Hardy, 1840-1928, was a very pessimistic writer who wrote stories of people in the countryside. The fictional country of Wessex, whose fate was governed by forces outside themselves, which connects him to naturalism. George the Obscure, 1895, Tess of the Herbervilles, 1891. The expansion of the reading middle class allowed for the development of popular literature like the detective stories written by Arthur Conan Doyle, 1859 to 1930, who, following the example of Edgar Allan Poe, wrote his tales of Sherlock Holmes. G.K. Chesterton, 1874 to 1936, wrote his Father Brown detective stories as well as other non-genre novels. H.G. Wells, 1866 to 1946, wrote many very interesting science fiction like The Time Machine, 1895, or The War of the Worlds, 1898, as well as non-genre novels. Literature for children also developed in the Victorian age as a separate genre. Some works become globally well known, such as those of Lewis Carroll, 1832 to 1898, author of the extremely rich fantasies Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, 1865, and Through the Looking Glass, 1865, adventure novels such as those by Robert Louis Stevenson, 1850 to 1894, were written for adults, and although they are now generally classified as for children and teenagers, they are still powerful. Treasure Island, 1883, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, 1886, Helen Beatrix Potter, 1866 to 1943, was an English author and illustrator, but best known for her children's books, which featured animal characters. The Tale of Peter Rabbit, 1902. Some Victorian poets worth mentioning are Robert and Elizabeth Browning, husband and wife; Gerald Manley Hopkins, 1842 to 1849, a precursor of modernism and the pre-Raphaelist of School of Painters and Poets; Christina and Gabriel Rossetti, brother and sister; Lord Alfred Tennyson, 1809 to 1892, was poet laureate during most of Queen Victoria's reign and sang the values of the British Empire and the Victorian age in some of his poems, like The Charge of the Light Brigade, 1854. These imperial values were also sung by Rudyard Kipling, 1865 to 1936, several years in his poems and in novels like The Man Who Would Be King, 1888, and The Jungle Book, 1894. Thank you. This is the great realistic school of fictions who come under the novelist and also the writing of their novels. Thank you.